subconsciously, we have been able to differentiate what is right, what is wrong. We knew that they were lying to us. We survived, and we were able to separate the lie from at least some partial truth. So I firmly don't believe that any above-designed communication strategy would work. I know that young people would be somehow distant to that, and they simply wouldn't trust authorities if there is something imposed on them. And I have a very strong belief and firm belief into you and into your ability, into your common sense, and into that you are able to differentiate fake news from reality. You have enormous space, the internet and everything in this digital space is enormous chance. So use it, and I believe that you can do that.
Thank you.
Thank you. The final word goes to you, Mr. Verhofstadt.
No, I believe, as is the case with Frans Timmermans, very much in the ability of individual people to judge that. But they have to have the capacity to do so. Today, what is the reality? The reality is that more or less 24,000 scrutineers are in Facebook in India looking to our pages and saying that is allowed and this is not allowed. But who is Mark Zuckerberg and his Facebook that he has the power to do so, while it is in fact a task for public authorities to do so? So we need, besides that, a regulation on what specific thing? That's on the algorithms, Mr. Zuckerberg. The algorithms that Facebook is using are making that people are always saying the same. So they see one thing of fake news, they been offered a second thing of fake news, a third thing of fake news. So these algorithms need to be regulated as fast as possible. And then the third thing, and I say it to Bas Eickhout, who don't like liberalism, I've understood, in any way, we need competition. If you have different choices next to Facebook, then people can judge and can choose.
Thank you, Mr. Verhofstadt. That brings us to the end of our first section. I think because we're a little behind time,
Yes.
we'll go straight into the second section.
Yes, we go straight into a sustainable Europe.
The EU claims to be a leader on climate action. Yet in many member states, there are problems with putting these goals into practice. In 2017, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change and Al Gore were awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for their efforts to increase awareness about man-made climate change. 2 years later, Greta Thunberg, the 16-year-old Swedish activist who started the Youth for Climate movement, was nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize. In March 2019, young people around the world took to the streets to demand political action to cut emissions and fight rising temperatures. Without a long-term strategy on climate change, national regulators worry that banks are leaving themselves open to financial risk. The European Investment Plan, launched in 2017, contributes to sustainable development, growth and jobs, while also tackling the root causes of migration. But the plan has been criticized for its lack of focus on sustainable development and poverty reduction. National lawmakers across Europe fear a backlash if they move too far or too fast. How can the EU successfully integrate sustainability into its financial policy? And how can the EU balance economic interests with climate needs and sustainable development?
Now, EU surveys consistently show that most Europeans believe that the EU needs to take a strong role in both climate and environmental action. It's not something to be left to the lower levels of government or public policy. That's especially true of the opinions of young Europeans. So let's start with a relevant hands-up question in that regard. Each of you, raise your hand if you support the student climate strikers. We've got 4 out of 5. Okay. Now, here's the hard question, and you don't get to answer, Mr. Zahradil, because it won't be relevant to you. What are you going to do about supporting them if you become Commission President?